Well, welcome to the 300 After Hours. And tonight, Rick was teaching
Yep.
Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, right?
Yes.
And so Rick is back here joining me, and we're going to have a little discussion about that teaching. And I have a few questions about it, a few comments as well. I thought it was a good teaching, Rick. I thought
Thank you.
you did a good job with it. So what stood out most to you as you studied and prepared for this teaching, these verses?
Well, what stood out to me the most of everything was that pleasure is not an evil thing. Pleasure is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But when you make pleasure the ultimate thing, mm-hmm. then it becomes a bad thing. Mm-hmm. In other words, if your chief goal in life is to just gain as much pleasure as you can in this life, you're misusing pleasure. You're mm-hmm. misusing the things that God's given us. Mm-hmm. And so that was a really big deal for me, because sometimes I think as Christians, we have this almost like Gnostic idea of like, oh, the material is bad. The material is not spiritual, therefore it's mm-hmm. not godly. So I'm going to resist the material. Or we think...
Or the ascetic life. Yeah. You just deny yourself of everything.
Right. Yeah. And so I think it was good for me because it reminded me, oh, no, Solomon had houses, he had gardens, he enjoyed listening to people sing. It wasn't those things that were bad. Mm-hmm. It was using those things to try and find peace, try and find happiness, mm-hmm. lasting happiness here. Mm-hmm. That was the part that was useless, not the things that he was pursuing. Yeah. And so for me, that was a big thing, because I think sometimes we can think we can't enjoy the things of this life. And mm-hmm. if we do, then we're sinning. Mm-hmm. But that's not really the right way to see God's creation.
Yeah. I want to return to that a little bit, because we'll talk about, how do you eat and drink also to the glory of God? Mm-hmm. I mean, everything, even in the mundane things of life, we can do that to the glory of God. So I want to return to that a little bit. Did you happen to look at, so basically this text, guys, is about Solomon looking for, in all these different things in life, for meaning and joy and pleasure, right? And then he says all of it is vanity, right? Yeah. Did you happen to look at the Hebrew word there for vanity?
I did a few lessons ago.
Yeah.
But not very recently now.
So that word really means, it's like a root word that talks about breath. Mm. It really kind of means, so it's vapor. Talking about something that is fleeting. Right. It's quickly fleeting, mm-hmm. right? It's important in a moment. My breath right now is important in a moment, but then it's gone. Mm-hmm. I'll never breathe it again. It's just gone. It comes and goes. A vapor, like what James will talk about, right? And so, and then later on at the bottom, after he mentions all these things, he says, I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all of my toils, and this was my reward for all my toil. Yeah. What was? My pleasure. Right. He's saying my pleasure was my reward in all these things that I was seeking, right? What's wrong with that? Well, it's the fact that it's fleeting. Right. That pleasure comes and goes in all these things he listed, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. And he mentions a lot of things, right? Because I'm a pastor, I like to alliterate. Oh, okay. So, booze.
Oh, booze, okay, right? Yeah.
Bucks.
Okay.
Money. He talks about buying everything that he wants and building castles and all this, right? So booze, bucks, bands.
Okay, bands, sure.
Singers and men and women, so bands. Babes.
Babes, yeah.
The concubines there, mm-hmm. right? And then I couldn't think of anything for this, but he says, I became great. I surpassed all, so I just put
brilliant?
Big time.
Big time.
Brilliant, big time. Well, brilliant would be the next thing, because that was the final thing, was brains. He says, all my wisdom remains. So booze, bucks, bands, babes, big time, brains. Okay. Those were all the things that he is seeking, right? Mm-hmm. And like you said, I mean, a lot of these things, I mean, these are good things. Music is good, having the ability to buy a home. I mean, having some money, those things are good. Right. But what he's really saying is that, like, my pleasure in seeking that thing was my pleasure, and then it quickly came and it was gone.
Yeah, right.
It was just faded away, just like a breath, right? And so we're really getting at here, I think, like, well, then what is the lasting pleasure? Yeah. Like, what is not vain?
Right.
Because some of these things are good. It's good to like, these are provisions of God, not the concubines. Right?
Yeah, right. Everything
but relationships.
Yeah.
Marriage, having provisions, music, all these things.
Yeah.
So what is the right way, and what is the reward that is not vain?
Yeah.
That's getting a little, because he'll answer that question at the end of Ecclesiastes, right?
He gets to it.
But that's really what he's getting at, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think, essentially enjoying the thing is a good thing. But because it's fleeting, because it's there, but it's going to be gone very soon, that's not where you should invest your hope. Your hope should not be in the thing. Enjoy the thing, but don't put your hope in the thing.
So enjoy it in the right way is ultimately what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Don't, it's not most glorifying to God necessarily just the ascetic life where you just deny yourself of everything.
Right.
So enjoy something if it's lawful for you. It's a good thing.
Right.
But enjoy it in the right way, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the next question for me.
Okay.
Is what does it mean to enjoy something in the right way? Mm-hmm. Because we go to the other Corinthians text, or whether you eat or drink, do it all to the glory of God. I mean, how do you eat and drink? How do you do things to the glory of God? How do you enjoy stuff in the right way? Where did you come up with it? That?
Well, I loved at our table we talked a lot about gratitude, of receiving it and recognizing this thing that I'm enjoying. It's a gift from God. And when you recognize God as the giver of that gift, it makes it so much more meaningful because it's not just another meaningless, mundane thing that you are interacting with, but it is a gift which God has given you to enjoy. And so among one of the ways that you can glorify God in eating or drinking or whatever you do is by being grateful for it, giving thanks for the thing that you've received.
So gratitude, recognizing it's a provision from God. That's one way.
Yeah.
And I think I love thinking of eating and drinking to the glory of God because you're like, wow, that's like the most mundane thing you could possibly do.
Right.
That's like saying I got in the car and I drove to Vaughn's to the glory of God.
Right.
I mean, but it's even more mundane than that because you do it more often.
Right.
You eat, a couple, 3 times a day, whatever. And so how do you eat and drink to the glory of God? I think I wrote down 3 things here. One of those things really was gratitude, that you would recognize that it's God provided, that thing, whatever it is. If it's food, that you can look at all of the smaller things and say, well, I have that food because I went to the grocery store and bought it and whatever. Those are the smaller whys.
Right.
The bigger why is that God provided it for you. Right. And so you recognize it's the provision of God. So recognize it's God provided. And then you enjoy that thing in the manner in which God prescribes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So like eating, God made food so that we can eat.
Yeah.
He created hunger in us so that we would eat.
Yeah.
And those two things work perfectly together. And so recognizing that food came from God and in being grateful for it, that's a good thing. But then eating in the manner in which God prescribes. So you can overeat.
Right.
And it's no longer to the glory of God, right?
Yeah.
And so it's recognizing that it's God provided and then enjoying it in the manner in which he prescribes.
Right.
So it's not becoming your God in some way or it's not the ultimate end.
Yeah.
Which is really what Solomon was doing in these things.
Yeah.
Seeking that, right? And the third thing was, so recognize it's God provided, enjoy it in the manner in which God prescribes, and then do it with a redeemed heart and mind. And that's something that you were talking a little bit about that Piper brought up.
Yeah.
That you can enjoy those things in the way that God prescribes in a kind of a dull and ordinary way.
Right.
Or with the joy of a person that has been redeemed. The joy that should just surround all of the things of life, even like drinking a glass of orange juice.
Yeah.
Well, you can drink it as someone that's on their way to hell, carrying all of your sin and the burdens of life, or you can enjoy that glass of orange juice as someone that every passing moment is getting closer and closer to glory.
Right.
And would that look different? It probably would.
Yeah.
Oh, right? Yeah. And so I really like that concept. I mean, I really like that. Like, how do you do even the most mundane things to the glory of the Lord?
Yeah.
Right.
And one thing I enjoyed our table talking about is the fact that Another aspect of which a thing becomes striving after wind or useless is if it becomes mundane, it's just another thing. Like, we talked about, like, okay, so a glass of orange juice, it's just another glass of orange juice. But when you consider that God created it, that God's given it to you to enjoy, it becomes so much more than just a glass of, well, it is a glass of orange juice, but the pleasure or the joy or the happiness that is accompanied in that experience of enjoying the thing God created is so much more. And so every little thing, when you do it to God's glory, or when you do it considering God, being grateful, recognizing He provided it for you, it makes everything wonderful or meaningful. But when you neglect to thank God or think about God or rejoice in God when you enjoy those things, then it becomes useless.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, the story War and Peace. And this if you watch the whatever 7-part series from PBS or whatever, the main character,
is that the one to watch?
Pierre, yes. This aristocrat that starts out the beginning and really living a life that is fairly self-indulgent and everything. But through the whole course of the story, he goes off and he's a part of war, and he endures horrible hunger, and his friend is killed, by the enemy, and just horrible things. And the end of the story returns him back home, and he's getting ready to eat. When he was away, he was very hungry and everything. And at one point, his friend gave him a little potato to enjoy when he was starving, He just was going to ravish the potato. And the guy's just like, just enjoy it, enjoy it. And so at the end of the story, he's back home, well-dressed, clothes, with his feast before him. And he goes to take his bite of the potato, and then he pauses and he thinks about that. And then, he cuts it a little bit smaller, and then puts a little salt on it, and then he enjoys that potato in the right way.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And that's really what we're talking about. There's nothing as mundane as eating a potato.
Right. Yeah.
But you can eat it in the way you did before.
Yeah. Or
the way that you can now. Right. When you see things rightly. And as Christians, I think that's what we're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Eat, drink, whatever we do to the glory of God. It means recognizing it's His provision for our life. We're not going to overindulge. We're going to enjoy it in the manner in which He prescribes. Intimacy, sexual intimacy would be a wonderful example of that, right? God created it. And so, yes, recognize it's from Him. Enjoy it in the manner in which He prescribed in the context of marriage. Yeah. And then enjoy it with a redeemed heart and mind. Right. Think about it the right way. Yeah. Right.
That's why I really, I also not just quoted 19 and 20, but I quoted verse 12 to give kind of the context. Paul's talking about liberty. What am I free to do? Right. And he says, well, all things are lawful for me. I'm free to do anything. But is it helpful? Yeah. And so he kind of gives us this two different ways to view life. We could either view life as doing right things or wrong things, or doing life in a way that brings us closer to God or farther from God. One is legalistic. The other one is faith-based. The other one is focused on God. Yeah, relational.
Right. It's relational. It's like it's easier. It's a different way to look at life. Yeah. Is this helping me to grow closer? So what is good and profitable for him is the thing that drives him closer to God. Right. Yeah.
That's why, I can go out and play a game. I can go out and watch a movie. I could watch The Passion of the Christ. I could watch 1917. I could watch a movie and it could draw me closer to God. But, can I go and watch Rambo? Can I go and watch, I don't know, any movie that's just a Quentin Tarantino movie? Yeah. Can I go watch those movies? No. Because those won't draw me closer to God. They're lawful for me to do, but do they draw me closer to God? No. And so that's why when we talk about pleasure and when we talk about enjoying the things of life, I really wanted us to understand that it's not just about thinking about what's the right thing to enjoy and the wrong thing to enjoy, but what can I enjoy that would actually bring me closer to God? And
so it's all like a relational view of, right? What would bring you closer to God. And of course, whatever you did that would be glorifying to God.
Absolutely.
Automatically, right? Because that's the whole point. That we're finding our pleasure in Him, that glorifies Him.
Yeah.
To find our satisfaction and pleasure in Him, enjoying the things that He gives us in the way in which we're supposed to enjoy them, recognize they come from Him. So that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was a great teaching.
Thank you.
Tonight. It's a wonderful part of Scripture. I like Ecclesiastes. As we make our way through here, it's kind of slow because you just get one opportunity every month.
Yeah,
but I think people are still tracking with it as we go through. Anything else that you guys talked about at the table, or is that any struggles that people had with this part of Scripture or anything?
I don't know that anybody had a struggle. I think just at the beginning, at the very beginning of just reading the Scripture, is that some people, as we were reading it, they were thinking like, oh, well, I enjoy doing those things. But Solomon said it's vanity. Must not be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't enjoy gardening. Maybe I shouldn't enjoy, music. And that's why I was really excited to teach, because that's the complete opposite of what Solomon's saying.
Yeah.
Or what God's communicating through the entirety of His Word, is that creation is a good thing. And when you enjoy it rightly, recognizing that it is a means to glorifying God, which is our ultimate end, then you find a rich satisfaction, because the pleasure or the joy that you're experiencing continues past that thing you enjoyed, and it finds its way to God.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. If you're finding your pleasure in that thing, it just quickly passes.
Yeah.
But think about if you actually find your pleasure in God, who is eternal, that means that your joy, the pleasure, is eternal.
Absolutely. Right? Amen.
Never changing, never being altered. So, all right. Well, that was a good study tonight, and thank you for joining me here. Let me see for more questions really quick. I think we kind of covered that. How would you apply this text, like practically? Like when you go out and go, I'm going to live 7 days before we meet again, like how would this text change the way that you attack this week?
Well, personally, for me, it would really be in what am I listening to? Because I listen to, at work, I often work by myself, so I just put my headphones in and listen to stuff. And I got to ask myself, and this is something I actually kind of wanted to ask you about, is, we live in a world where you're constantly being hit by something that you can view or something that you can consume. And so for me, going into this week, I'm going to consider, I'm going to listen to this podcast. It might not even be a bad podcast, but is it good that I listen to this podcast? Like, is it going to bring me closer to God? Am I enjoying it too much? Am I spending too much time there? Not enough time focused on what I need to be focused on? So for me, it'll be considering what am I listening to and whether or not it's beneficial for am I able to still be productive at work?
Yeah.
Am I being distracted? Is it drawing me closer to God? Helping me expand my mind or concepts that are in the Bible, or is it just kind of distracting me from my work and from God? Yeah. So
yeah. Well, that's
because I feel like that's because I feel like that's one of the biggest things that I think as Christians in this day and age can ask ourselves is, what are we consuming? Because we live in a consumer culture.
Yeah, and I think that goes down to like when I was talking about in the manner in which God prescribes. That's because now we're talking about quantities, measures, times, and you can take something that's even good like that, like listening to sermons or listening to good, healthy podcasts or something, even if it's not like just purely entertainment.
Yeah.
If you say, no, this is like good, healthy content. What if it's like all good sermons or something? But if the person were just to consume sermon after sermon after sermon after sermon, is there a time when that quantity is not really what God intended?
Right.
I would argue that there is.
Yeah.
When the disciples begin to follow Jesus, the first thing in Matthew 4 is they drop their nets, they follow, they get 3 chapters, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, 7, 3 chapters of doctrinal teaching, and then a challenge, and then they come off of the mountaintop, and they come down into the multitude, and Jesus starts ministering to people. Would it be right to just sit on the mountaintop and get 28 chapters of teaching.
Right.
No, that's not what Jesus modeled for him. And I do think that I like when you talk about consuming, because I really believe that a healthy way to view like life is to say we were created to be creators, not consumers.
Right.
We don't exist just to consume things.
Right.
And so when our life is, just so many of the things that we do that in a right quantity would not be bad. Like when you eat, you're consuming, right? If you're only eating, it's not good.
No.
Because we weren't created to just entirely consume. Right. Same thing with entertainment. Same thing with, if you're playing a video game or whatever. I mean, there's times when you consume in a sense, but we weren't created for that.
Right.
We were created in God's image, and God is a creator.
Right.
It's to build, to take dominion,
right.
to create and build things that weren't there, build relationships, build, do your job at work.
Yeah.
And so I honestly think that in the manner in which God intends or prescribes is important.
Yeah.
Because even if it's a good thing, it needs to be done in the way that God intended for it to be done, which means if you're just like consuming that one good thing, you probably are out of balance on, the amounts or the times or the quantities. You need to go out and start doing stuff that is glorifying to God.
Right.
So that I'm taking in, I'm eating and drinking to the glory of God. That's consuming.
Yeah.
Right. But if I'm only consuming, it's no longer the glory of God.
Right.
Because I wasn't created to be a consumer. I was created to be a creator. That's kind of the way that I look at that.
That's really good.
So anyway, well, that's some awesome discussion. I could actually talk about that for a long time, but the battery on our camera will probably run out. So we'll go ahead and call it a night. Thank you all for joining us. And next week, we'll be back on with the Galatians soap video. And so we will see you again next week, the same time, same place. And God bless you all this week.